So, welcome everybody. I am going to start, and I think some people will join us as we go. But I want to stick to time and appreciate that all of you have been here. So, I'm Nicole Sorrell. For those who don't know me, my absolute passion is bringing kindness to the world and igniting potential. And those of you in my personal life will know that I'm always there trying to support and enable. And in my professional life, I'm a global director of Lumina Learning and a co-founder of this incredible charity called the Growth Project. So I'm able to actualize my purpose across the board of my life. I'm very grateful for that. I want to thank you all so much for being here as a tribute to my beautiful late brother, Sasha Sorrell. And I'm very excited to be sharing some of his wisdom today as well. And we are very aligned in our passions to make a difference in the world. So he is right here urging every one of you on to have that self-compassion and that centeredness, and also just to be your potential. I want to thank so much to my co-hosts, Julie Robinson and Michelle Davis. Pretend that you're with me physically. My dearest soulmates, friends, and have the pleasure to be my colleagues as well. So I'm exceptionally grateful to both of you and to be sharing this beautiful platform with you today. Again, we had our first session with many of you were there in May, where we looked at resilience through sharing our stories. Those of you who were there shared their stories too. And then we took the emerging themes that came out from that conversation, and we put it into those 2 booklets, which we've now sent out to everybody. And thank you for your lovely feedback. And it was really based on that feedback that we decided to have a deeper dive in terms of resilience and looking at the relationship between resilience and meaning. So in terms of today's flow, we're going to check in now, and then we'll be exploring the relationship between resilience and meaning, getting your perspectives. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Sasha's book that my sister Michelle and I are editing at the moment, called Realize Your Potential. Then I'll share my perspective and views and stories. Excited that Julie will then share hers. Thank you. And then we'll have an open forum discussion. Now, seeing all of you there is so much wisdom, and any of you could be standing on this side, and we would absolutely love to capture as much of that as possible. We have limited time, so I'm going to ask you to please use the chat. As you've got thoughts, theories, ideas, please write them in the chat. We will gather them all afterwards. If you're happy for your name to be quoted next to that thought, then just write your name underneath that. Then we'll quote that back to you. But we really welcome and would really love to hear your voices as much as possible. And thankfully, Michelle will try and manage that for us. So I'm going to start by enabling us all to get present. As we know, it's difficult times for many people, and being on Zoom and having so many opportunities right now as well, whereby we can learn so much. There's definitely this opening right now for transcendence, and I just feel everybody's opening themselves and grasping it just to step in that possibility of learning. So we are so grateful that each of you have chosen to be here with us in this conversation. We don't take it lightly, and we're very, very in awe and grateful. So to get present, may I ask you just to take a moment to sit back in your chair, to slowly close your eyes, and to start focusing on your breath. And just take a breath in through your nose and just sigh out. And we're going to do 3 cycles of breath. We're going to breathe in for 5, hold for 4, and out for 6. And all we know is that when we breathe and we extend and maximize the air capacity in our lungs, we can trigger the vagus nerve, which releases all these wonderful positive hormones like oxytocin and endorphins and things. So that's just one of the many, many values of breath. So let's have a go. So just breathe in. 4, 5, and hold your breath. 3, 2, 1, and exhale. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now another deep breath in. And hold your breath. And when you're ready, release it and just sigh out. Last cycle, breathing in. Hold. And breathe out. An easy breath, coming back to normal. And feeling that energy surging through our bodies and bringing our presentness and our focus. And knowing that everything that we share and think and be in this moment is coming from the highest good and highest intent. Thank you. So we're going to move now to a check-in just to hear each of your voices, just even through a word, just to describe in an adjective, how are you? How are you feeling? What's your state of being? So if you can on your phone, you can put slido.com or just hold your camera up to the QR code and it will ask you to open up Slido, and then that will happen automatically. Or you can just put in the numbers 62936 in Slido, and then you'll see that you'll be able to enter your comments, and you can enter a few if you'd like to, as many as you'd like, really. Okay, so you'll see it appearing on the screen now. Can you all see the words appearing?
Yes.
Great. Oh, how beautiful. So there's this big feeling of contentment, relaxed, calm, inspired, moving into cautiously optimistic, and some of you completely exhausted, shattered, tired. So we have this huge spectrum again, from being relaxed and maybe even excited and creative to a bit of overwhelm. As people say, you know, the pandemic is taking its toll, it's extended time, and it's impacting all of us in different ways. And we really are being called on to access our depth in terms of resilience. So just to be with that feeling and to know, to access it, to feel it. And then maybe comes a point where we then choose to move on. And we know that with these feelings, we can move in a moment, absolutely within a day. We all travel up and down where we have moments of just collapse and then moments of engagement and creativity. We're there and then we're not there. I often find myself saying, I just can't. And then I say, I can. And then I get back in. So thank you for sharing. So you can keep sharing some of your thoughts. We will capture that. And I'm going to hand over to Julie.
Right, so good afternoon, everyone. It's a beautiful but chilly day here in Johannesburg in South Africa. So a chilly but very warm welcome to you from wherever you are dialing into us from across the world. So I think by way of starting our session today, and as Nicole mentioned previously, you know, we had our time together on the 26th of May, which feels like a year ago now, but also just kind of last week. And I think the premise of our conversation then really sat in that space of we have that power of choice, and we can make decisions in a moment in terms of what happens in our world and in our life. And we did kind of speak about we used sort of Viktor Frankl's quote back then about sort of the space between stimulus and response, and kind of the space there is that breath, and that's where we have that power to choose how we want to sort of behave in a certain moment and show up in a certain moment. But For those of you who might not be familiar with Viktor Frankl, he was an Austrian neurologist and a psychiatrist who was a Holocaust survivor. And essentially, he spent a lot of time across a variety of different concentration camps. And so he is the founder of what we term logotherapy. And essentially, what is really critical in the premise of logotherapy is really around that willingness to want to find meaning. And so it's finding meaning in our life in whatever shape or form that looks like. And what he experienced in terms of even kind of his time during being part of those concentration camps was that those people, those individuals who had or could find a sense of or draw on a sense of meaning in terms of their particular circumstance, were actually more able to survive and to live and to make it through those absolute dire circumstances. And so what we wanted to start the conversation with you here this afternoon is really that life is never made unbearable by circumstance. And to hear that from a man who's endured what he has almost takes your breath away. But he says, but only by a lack of meaning and purpose. So our life, whatever circumstance we might find ourselves in is one thing. But if we cannot find our meaning and purpose that sits in that space, and if we cannot tap into that, that's where that sort of sense of deep, I can't bear this, I can't carry on, and I can't continue. And so it's very different. He was a real kind of father of meaning, I guess you could say. Freud was the guy who was about sort of the power of pleasure, for example, whereas Alder was the father of sort of looking at the power that willingness for wanting power. But in this particular context, which is really quite key, and this is really the premise of where we're going to start our conversation this afternoon, is around, if we look at the circumstance or either our work or what goes on in terms of our life circumstance, or even an unchangeable circumstance, how do we actually shift? How do we start to go deeper and to look for that sense of meaning? And so what Nicole and I are going to both speak about today, and we'll hope you're going to have a lot that you'll share in the chat with us as well, is really around talking about our particular stories and the meaning that we've been able to find, and the purpose that's been able to kind of dive down and dig up and look at. And so when we talk about deepening resilience to live meaningfully, there's quite a lot that sits under that. And I'll speak about that a bit later in our conversation. But what we want to really do now is to ask you guys, potentially, if you can, in the chat for us, is what is, in your mind, the relationship between resilience? So what we spoke, whatever that kind of means for you, whatever is coming up for you, the relationship between resilience and meaning. What does that start to look like in your particular life and in your particular story? So if you want to just take a couple of moments just to pop that into the chat, whatever comes up in your mind would be great. We would love to hear it.
Thanks, Jules, so much for that reflection, and Nicole for the great introduction. There's some wonderful things coming through in the comments about first the pain and then the rising. Sure, that's quite a powerful statement. Only by being resilient is there the possibility of finding meaning. Meaning and purpose is the foundation of resilience. And it's about staying true to oneself and staying on purpose. Sharon has noted that meaning for me relates to something that matters, something important. And so resilience is that fuel to keep going, to achieve it. As I'm reading these comments, I'm kind of getting the sense of meaning as the nucleus, which enables something around it to flourish from a resilience point of view. Resilience is the ability to survive trying circumstances, and meaning is your purpose. There's an interesting correlation. Resilience is your overall reaction and control of stressful situations or people, and meaning is that underlying emotion attached to that, which guides resilience. Fascinating comment here about resilience coming from hope. And hope for me comes from creating something of value. The relationship for me is that purpose can often motivate your ability to be resilient. A wonderful quote here: you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Yeah, to be able to continue going because you believe in something that is bigger than yourself. And purpose needs to be wholesome and for the betterment of not only your life, but of others too. Resilience enables you to remain undistracted in your search for meaning. Not getting by any means through all of these because there's just such a beautiful wealth of wisdom coming through here. Purpose enables me to bounce back, to spring back into shape. Purpose drives my resilience. So I think definitely just in summary, there's a wonderful interconnectedness here, which ties very much into, I'm sure, what resonated with many people in wanting to sign up to be here about, the title that we chose, Deepening Resilience to Live Meaningfully. So it is wonderful to kind of, see the seesaw of the connectedness and kind of wondering where people find themselves on that scale. And the last quote I'd like to mention is one from Roni, who said, Rumi said, "The wound is where the light enters." And I think, that's a great point in which I can lead over to Nicole in terms of the real light that Sasha was, and how his entry into sharing all of his wisdom around resilience and purpose is something that I think we'd love to tap on today.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Sure. So this is my precious brother, Sasha. Painting behind him is one that I actually did for him. The 36 blessings that I wrote for him and then stuck them in the painting at the picture of the kotel. And now this painting's worked its way back to me, so it sits in my dining room. So Sasha's written a book called Realize Your Potential, and at the absolute center of his realized model sits purpose. And I'm really excited. Michelle, my sister, and I have been working on his book, and we look forward to sharing it with you in due time. So there's an excerpt I've taken from his book, which specifically looks at soul purpose. And Sasha's permission, I would love to share it with you. So you could just relax, reflect, any comments as I'm sharing it, feel free to write. So these are Sasha's words. I have a deep knowingness that each of us are here for a unique purpose. Just as every animal, every insect, every creature, every organ in the human body, every living organism has a purpose, I am certain that every human being has their own unique purpose too. Our job is to find that purpose and do everything we can to make this world a better place for us all. There is a higher power, a creative force that has given each person a mission or a purpose to fulfill on this earth. I know this to be true in my heart and soul. All you need to do is listen to your calling and connect with your natural given gifts that each person has. Once you have found these gifts, you can learn to use them to serve the world in some way. So how do you connect to your soul purpose? For me, that's Sasha, it was a journey of self-discovery, of learning about myself, becoming clear on my strengths and weaknesses, and listening to what is calling me from the depths of my soul. I also became clear on my purpose because it was doing the things that felt most natural to me. Perhaps your gift lies in writing, painting, singing, parenting, building relationships, leadership, teaching, science or maths. He then later goes on to ask some questions to reflect on in terms of your identifying your purpose. And these are questions that he invites you to reflect on. What are you naturally good at? What are your gifts and talents? What are you doing when you're most happy and joyful? What most inspires you and energizes you? What is the work you were born to do? If money were no object, what would you do? What would you give? If you were to guess what your purpose is, what would it be? Sasha then ends this part by saying, when you connect to your soul purpose, you will know because you feel alive. You feel like you're making a positive difference, and you feel like you're in the flow of life. Thank you, Sasha. That's beautiful. And just once again, it just reminds me how completely connected I do believe that Sasha and I are twin flames of the same soul, and my view of life in the world is completely aligned. I also have a deep sense of knowingness that we are a soul having a physical experience. I absolutely do believe that. I also believe that there's a much bigger picture, and that we don't know that bigger picture. With our limited perception, we can only see through the keyhole at any moment in time. And that gives me huge strength at many moments in my life when I'm feeling broken, overwhelmed, unable to cope. I'm able to say to myself, well, I don't know, and I don't need to know. It's not for me to know. So I have a strong belief and connection to God. And for you, it may be a higher power, a source. But I absolutely believe and know that God knows that this is all part of a greater plan. So whatever is happening right now is for a reason. I just can't see it. I just don't know it. And that doesn't mean that I don't feel the pain when things are happening. I absolutely believe in the necessity for us to be present in that moment. When Sasha passed away, the agony and the pain was so intense and was so real. And I tried to understand it. I needed to understand. I was desperate to. And then I got to a point to say, I can have lots of theories, but I don't know the truth. Maybe no one does, but I know that God knows. And that creates a sense of, a level of sense of peace and certainly acceptance. And I've actually absolutely learned to accept the situation, whatever comes, and say, okay, I feel the pain. I don't understand. I don't need to understand. I don't want to dwell in the pain. I don't want to feel self-pity, because I do believe that there's always blessings in our lives. There's always someone else struggling in different ways. But that there is also that moment of gratitude to say, thank you, God. You know, I don't know why you've given us these tests, but I do absolutely believe that we are tested to the level that we can cope with, that God doesn't give us a test and a challenge that we can't cope with. And the greater our light, the greater the test that we have. So for me, it's, how do I choose to shop right now in this moment? I'm faced with this. What am I going to do? How do I choose to be? So there's something about feeling, accepting that I don't understand, thanking God, and then breathing through breath, calming, and then able to get into problem solving or logical or reasoning. But that process that I go through just helps me. And I can think about, just before COVID, just before the pandemic started and lockdown happened, I had this whole series of events that happened together that I thought, this isn't possible. You know, you can be hit once, you can't be hit several times. And it was the art site, which is the anniversary when Sasha passed away, which is a very emotional time for my mother, father, family. And Sasha had given me, well, he didn't give it to me. He had a diamond from his fiancée that he was going to get married to. My mother gave me his diamond that I wore around my neck, and it was on my heart. I always felt so close to him wearing his diamond. And on his yard site, the diamond was stolen. And not only did it distress me, it distressed my mother so deeply, which was as difficult. But that happened. I then unnecessarily lost a tooth. I had a big car accident. I had some big work challenges, some children's struggles. Everything was happening. And all I could do is say, okay, I can either kind of crumble and say, why, you know, I've lost enough. Or I could be centered and go through that process. Okay, God's testing me, and he's only testing me in a way that I can cope. There's things that I can draw on here that I have to listen to. And I have to know that I don't understand, but this is bigger than me. There is something bigger at hand. And that is a process that I'm sharing with you, because also it's very empowering when it comes to resilience. And in terms of this sense of meaning and kind of being on a soul journey, I very much feel that my belief is that this lifetime that we're in is part of a whole series of eons of lifetimes. But like Sasha said, we absolutely have a specific purpose to achieve in this lifetime. And that for each of us, we have our own unique purpose. There's nobody else in the world that can do your purpose. Your purpose is written for you. You contracted it. You're here to do it. So what's interesting is, like Sasha, I thought, well, okay, and I do still believe this, that there's different types of purposes. So the one purpose could be, as he was referring to, what's your natural gift? What's your role? And maybe that can give us clues to our purpose. So I know for me, when I am facilitating or coaching, I literally cannot stop myself running and skipping down the road because I am so excited. I just feel breathless, and I'm about to be with people who I know are going to be shifted in such a deep way at the end of this session, whether it's a 90-minute coaching session or a day or 3 days. I just know it. And I'm so excited to hold that space of whatever comes up and know there's going to be a movement. And that joy and that breathlessness says to me that this is me being on purpose. And then he speaks about character traits as well. And I know, working on a number of things, I'll share some in a moment, that we can work on. It could be that we're here for one character trait. Maybe we're here in this lifetime because we have to manage anger. We didn't get it right last time. This life is about managing anger. Or it could be about setting boundaries. Or it could even be about being better at planning. So it could be about one thing. It could be about self-love. If we heal ourselves, one person heals, we all heal because of the interconnectedness. William Shakespeare has that quote. I don't know if I've got it. You know, something around, you know, all men and women are players on this set of life. And maybe we all are. We're all here just to play different roles and to ignite someone else to fulfill their purpose. But it certainly gave Aura a strong sense of calm and resilience in that moment when she was feeling there was no point, feeling, you know what, there is such a point. I know I'm here for some reason. And again, I don't need to know what that reason is. So I love that. So that's some thoughts just around soul purpose and soul journeying. One other thing I want to say on that is just around breath, because for me, life is about breath, and I wouldn't survive if I didn't. Well, we all wouldn't survive if we weren't breathing, but by conscious breathing, bring it in whenever there's a difficult moment, just centers me and enables me to cope. And a visualization that I have that I want to share with you is just that when God, Hashem, breathed the soul into Adam, when he created man, he breathed by breathing the soul is our higher self. So whenever we breathe, we are activating our higher self. And I have this strong sense of my higher self, my soul self, which is a godly spark within each and every one of us and our body. And what's really powerful is I often have conversations between my godly self, my soul, and my body. And I can go back and forth between the two roles and say, okay, give me some advice here. What do you think? How am I doing? What do I need? And it's a different voice that comes in, and it's a wonderful way of, you can call it connecting to your intuition or whatever it may be, but recognizing that we are body and soul, and having that conversation is a very powerful process for me. Just to finish off, I'm going to just kind of connect in with what Sasha was saying around, he spoke about the importance of self-awareness and how do you show up, and knowing kind of your strengths and weaknesses. And in terms of getting clear around purpose and why we're here, I was reflecting back and I could kind of see 3 stages, which is kind of being, beginning, and becoming. So the first stage is the being, kind of who am I? And we can do this in different ways, but it's important. And I know most of you here are doing this all the time. It's about the open inquiry, the listening, you know, without the judgment, without the defensiveness, true, real listening to understand, and to gather that feedback, that self-reflection where we become our own observer. Okay, that's you, Nicole, doing that thing again. Let's see if you can do it better next time. You know, or I'm in that state, how long am I going to hold that for? When am I going to get out of it? If I'm in this place of sadness, how long do I want to be there? When am I going to move? Or anger, whatever it may be. Journaling is such a powerful way of understanding yourself. My daughter Shanti teaches me this. She journals religiously and shares some of her thoughts with me, and it's so empowering, and I learn so much from her. And then the final one is assessments that Sasha refers to, and many of you know and have worked with me in terms of Lumina, and the beauty of this is just a word cloud, is to say, well, okay, what are my strengths? And to celebrate them, because sometimes we don't even have language, let alone awareness of what our strengths are, but to see it and then to shine the light on that, and then maybe to apply it in other situations. And to equally recognize, like, my empathetic is right there in the middle. I feel for others, I have an empathy, but sometimes I overextend that, and then I can become emotionally stretched. As they say, too much of a good thing. But, you know, we can use some of our strengths well. You know, my takes charge, I'm happy being in a leadership place and driving forward, overextends to controlling. But if it's done with consciousness, it's okay. But which are the ones for you that are not serving you? So if I look at the qualities here, I can see what I need to dial up and dial down. So this is the one I was just showing around the word cloud, which is saying, as a way of seeing what are the strengths and how to amplify them. The smaller ones are the ones that I own less of, being more measured and cautious. And then looking at it from this graphical representation, which for me just gives me clarity. What do I want to tune up? What do I need to tune down? So my empathetic, that can make me emotionally stretched, to impulsive, yes, how can I serve? How can I help? Wanting to give, but seeing that doesn't serve me if it's boundless. So we're needing to be more aligned to strategy, to purpose, activating more attention, you know, and cautiousness, and you know, being more the observer and less of a perfectionist around my evidence base. So just pulling this together, I see these kind of 3 processes. So the being, how do I show up right now through reflection, journaling, getting feedback, doing assessments to have different perspectives, personality, emotional level. And then the next stage, beginnings. And for me, this has been a critical part of my journey, is understanding why I show up the way I show up. Where does that come from? And looking at our childhood and seeing, you know, when we're young, our brain is hardwired so quickly, and then we don't have any choice. Our beingness is a result of that hardwiring. And once we understand what are our limiting core beliefs, what is it that we say to ourselves, even unconsciously, repeatedly, that attracts a world around us that serves us in some way. So some of my limiting core beliefs around not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being visible, has forged me on to create, develop businesses. I've done 3 degrees and other qualifications, and it's keep pushing me. So I'm grateful for those limiting core beliefs. And again, recognizing everything's in God's hands has happened for a reason. But also I can start to see where it doesn't serve me. And by understanding the limiting core beliefs, it's as if I'm literally loosening the chains that have been holding me attached to a certain way of being. So then I'm able to go back and shift my beingness in a way that serves me, gives me more breath, more presence, and more joy. That I'm not a victim to that. I'm actually in power. I'm taking the reins and I'm saying, this is where I'm going, with grace, love, and kindness, in a way that serves me and serves the universe. And then we move into becoming. And the becoming is where am I moving towards? And this is about getting clear on the being and the beginnings, and then looking ahead around our purpose. What is my purpose? Why am I here? And how can I fulfill that? How do I keep refining myself and step into that possibility of that purpose? And then at the same time, going back to Aura's perspective around not having any attachment to it. So the clarity is so powerful, but then we release the attachment and know, I may not even know my purpose, but God knows my purpose, and it's going to be fulfilled at one moment in time. And that's why I'm here. And then therefore I have at the top there the big picture, connecting in to the higher self, the godly self, part of a greater plan that I can't see right now with my limited range, but God knows. And at the bottom, breath, which feeds everything. So I pray that in my sharing that it's been of some value to some of you here, and look forward to hear some of your comments and chats. So Michelle, I'm going to hand over to you. I don't know if there's any chats you want to share, or move on to Julie.
Yes, thank you, Nicole, so much just for those beautifully wise words. There is just the most amazing discussions and thoughts being shared in the chat. And I think what's really powerful is something Brenda shared about, she was speaking about the flow of life, and how sometimes you feel you're swimming sort of in this flow. Sometimes you feel as if the flow is carrying you. Sometimes you feel as if it's a tidal wave hitting you. But this is actually where one learns resilience. And as you said, it's about how you show up. And she used those exact same words, saying it's actually about how we show up, building one brick at a time, through experience. And I'm just so taken by that, because it talks also to the picture you mentioned in that beautiful photo of Sasha, behind him. So it's about these building blocks and the experience that our soul has to come into this physical form on earth. So a very, very powerful reflection there.
Thank you. Thanks, Brenda, for sharing that. So Julie, over to you, darling.
Thank you, and thanks so much, Nicole. Yeah, to echo Michelle's sentiments, just beautiful what you've shared and what you've shared from Sasha. Just an absolutely meaningful afternoon and experience to hear those words. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So maybe just to start, I know I've got a couple of minutes and I can talk the hind leg off a donkey. So I'm going to try and keep this kind of flowing and engaging, hopefully. So as we've kept going, please feel free to throw your comments in the chat, because we want to keep them afterwards and reflect on them and keep the conversation going. But essentially, over the past sort of, let's just say, I think it's 7 weeks since we had our last session, I've definitely experienced my ups and downs, health-wise, for various reasons. And I've had these moments of reflecting on this, when Michelle and Nicole and I sat and we thought, what are we going to call this? It was that deepening resilience to, live meaningfully. And when we said it out loud, I immediately connected to it. And then as the weeks kind of rolled on by, I was getting confused by almost our own language, if that makes sense. And I kept coming back to this thought of this evolving construct of resilience. It's this thing that has been sitting with me, and I'm kind of toiling with it, and I'm playing with it. And there's this desire within me to redefine it in my life. And I think just globally, if we look at what's happening with COVID, there's almost an existential vacuum or crisis that is happening in varying levels for people. And, you know, as I kind of thought about that word, I thought, well, what does this deepening resilience mean in my life and in my story and in my context? And equally, how do we link that to living meaningfully? And what does that even mean? What does that even look like? And so over these kind of, especially the last 2 weeks of reflection, I've been really struck by having more questions than answers. And not that this is an answer space, but for myself, like I've actually just really been quite struck by that there's a lot more questions than there is sort of clarity. But the points I wanted to maybe just reiterate before I go into some of the things that have happened or did happen, and some of the kind of story elements, is really around that concept of the reason why we set this up and wanted to have these conversations is really to be able to connect, you know, through our own storytelling, that we can connect, you can connect to your story of resilience, and you can make sense of that for yourself and really connect deeply to that. And so essentially it's a very personalized and individualized journey. And I think we've used language and words to hook onto certain things, you know, about what resilience is. And for me, I'm learning that it's almost like a felt experience. It's a deep, almost inner knowing. It's a little bit different to what maybe I've been schooled in terms of what resilience starts to look like. So when I thought about the then versus now, you know, the image that came to mind, and it was through a conversation yesterday, where it was the picture I had of resilience previously was around having this armor on. So if you can imagine, like, you know, we talk about resilience, it's about being strong, it's mustering up, it's kind of courageous, it's brave, it's fighting, it's getting on the horse and charging into battle. And if I think about my own journey with illness, it's that kind of fighting. You know, we're fighting an illness, we're fighting COVID. There's a very different way that starts to come about and can start to happen. So it's that dredging through the mud to get to the other side, to be suddenly victorious. And then what, you know? And so I've almost seen it as this blood, sweat, and tears, this hardening, this armory that has sat on me, which is very heavy and exhausting to carry. And how I've shifted my perspective on resilience now is that it's going back to that thing we spoke about last time around the emergence. It's more of a softening. It's being more compassionate to myself, my ability to really just connect in and listen to what my body's saying to me, listen to what's going on emotionally. It's about being still and taking off that armor. And I think what's happening in the world today, and especially through my story, you know, which I'll go into a bit more depth of just now, is when we take off that armor, we have to be seen by the world. We have to be seen. We have to see ourselves within the context of our own story. And that takes courage. That takes a different level of mustering up. In other words, it's the opposite. It's actually going to a bit more of a still place of stillness, of rest, of ease, of listening, of dropping down and dropping inward. And I think that's really been something that's that allowing whatever comes up to actually just come without that harsh sort of judgment. And you know, I say this because in the last year and a half, you know, for those of you who went on our previous call, I've had sort of bouts of and struggles with chronic illness for a large portion of my life. And last year I couldn't work for 9 months. And essentially it was during that time I had the most profound experience, which has shifted my, I guess, view of what it means to be resilient. And it gives me the context around what does it actually look like? So what does the deepening of resilience look like? And so in February last year, I was gifted with the opportunity to meet Dr. Ela Munga. She is a medical doctor and a breathwork practitioner, and the founder of Breathwork Africa. And so someone said to me, go and have this experience. And I went to go and see her, and I remember being so skeptical and just thought to myself, this is absolutely, the worst thing. I don't know why I'm here and why I'm having to kind of put myself through this. But I lay down and we just started to breathe. It was nothing fancy. It was nothing like, that I was expecting. It was just connecting to my own breath. And I remember in that moment, just breathing and then breathing. And I went to her for obviously my physical health. And suddenly I started to feel this electricity like rush through, like my hands were on kind of this massive, electrical pulse that started to rush through my arms and into my being. And I remember lying there and at one point she said, your cells are coming alive, your body's coming alive. And I remember sort of lying there and just thinking, oh my word, it's happening. Like I've never actually felt my body feel differently to sort of pain and discomfort and I dealt with from a chronic illness perspective. And it was the most profound experience I've had in my life. Tears rushed through from my eyes, and I had this massive smile on my face, but it was really the essence of what that moment taught me on reflection was that it was the softening inwards. It was just being calm. It was being still that allowed me to start connecting to what it really meant to be resilient. This pushing forth, this going for medical treatments and doing all this stuff is quite like harsh and hardening, and you're fighting something all the time. Whereas this was a stillness. This was a calming. This was a dropping in. This was a much deeper level of connection that I've yet to experience. And that profound moment, I've been seeing Ela over the past year, and the experiences I've had through just my breath have been absolutely profound and it's almost become a homecoming for me. Going into the depths of my beingness has connected me to the essence of what it means to be resilient. And it's so opposite to what I've been taught or what I've thought resilience has been, my entire life. And so once I started to get to that perspective and started to see that and started to experience it from a visceral perspective, it was the first time in that moment I ever experienced what it means to feel hopeful. And I know a lot of you have mentioned that in the chat, but I've talked about hope, but I've never actually felt it. And that was the first time I actually got to feel that. So what happened subsequent to that and my journey over last year when I wasn't working is that, and I referred to this last time, but it was the moment for me when we talk about that deepening, it was that softening it was that sort of moment of clarity around resilience. But the other part of it is that to discover the meaning through our life experiences and through our hardship, it was a period, I think it was November last year, so this is quite recent, where I was away and I had sort of, I think it was about 3 weeks of self-isolation. And it was that one night where I set the intention throughout when I was going down to this place that I want to understand what is the meaning behind what is going on in my life that I'm struggling with, what I'm dealing with. And in one night, it was like all of a sudden, something inside of me said, write it tonight. And I wrote 3 pages of the gifts of chronic illness. What has this thing given me? So throughout my life, it was like, as opposed to sort of saying, when am I going to fight this and get over it and move forward and etc. It was more of a stillness. It was more of a, whatever I've been given through this process, what does that start to look like? And I think when I discovered the meaning through gifting, through looking at my life experience and my struggle through gifts, that's where I got that meaning element. And it came so beautifully for me. And I haven't, as I said last time, I haven't added to that list, since that particular night. But I do read it often and become quite cognizant of the fact that this is what's kind of gone on for me. But that was a really sort of beautiful experience for me. And it was probably where my healing journey, my deep healing journey actually started. was when I was able to make that connection. And so when we look at kind of connecting meaning to purpose, for me, they're a little bit different. Whereas, about sort of 4 years ago with my team at work, I did Simon Sinek's Why Journey, and I wrote down my purpose statement, and it was great, and I felt connected to it. But in essence, it was quite head. It kind of was quite cerebral. I read it, but I felt it, but not really. I just sort of carried on with life. But what ended up happening is that the gifts actually gave me the meaning. And then there were 3 questions last year that Michelle and I actually, who's on the call here with us, we asked each other these 3 questions in, I think it was about October last year. And essentially the first question, these questions is what took my kind of meaning to purpose. And the first one was around what brings you joy. And I know a lot of people ask this, and we ask this to our friends, and we ask this to people around us, but it was really a little bit of a different context around, those moments, feelings, spaces, places, those things in life that you just want to like her and I got quite excited about it. You just want to you want to bustle it, you want to capture it, you want to savor that moment, you want to hold it and keep it. And there was this that you just don't want to let it go, and you can't describe it. It's like you can't articulate what that particular thing is. So the first question was, what brings you joy in that context? The second one was really around what are the gifts that we bring. So essentially it was like, what are the gifts do we bring to the world? And it was framed in a little bit of a different context. So, if you we linked it to the joy moments. So if you had to have these moments of joy, for example, what was it about us that enabled us for those moments to actually be joyful? And how could we, create those moments? And how could we do that in a way that we could fill ourselves with joy, but add value to the world and those around us? And then the last question was, what sort of problems or challenges or struggles do we see in ourselves and others in society that we want to get involved and play a part in solving and kind of healing or remedying? And what really sits close to our heart? And these 3 questions, I think, Michelle and I both took, quite a few days where, we just sit and ponder them and think about them. It wasn't an overnight process, but it took me from suffering to seeing the gifts of that suffering in my felt human experience. And from those gifts, being able to find meaning, and the meaning and asking ourselves these 3 questions dropped me into being very clear on what my purpose is. And it wasn't like this cerebral thing now it was a heartfelt experience. And so that's really the journey that I took around getting really clear on deepening resilience. For me now makes the connection I make is about the stillness, the softening, the going inward, the calming down, the slowing down, the actual stopping. And then it takes it to what gifts can I see and experience in this moment that have happened? What meaning can I extract? And then going back, and looking at asking ourselves these 3 questions and getting some clarity on our particular purpose. But what I've realized since kind of Michelle and I shared these with each other in January, February, and what I realized over the last few months, I got back to work in February, and that this is not a linear process. It sounds linear based on what I've described, but it's really not linear. It's like messy and chaotic. But the thing that makes this process so messy and chaotic, in a sense, is these entrenched, and this is what I've realized, deeply over the last few months, these entrenched narrative are this component of so we have these entrenched narratives, these belief systems, these labels. And when I reflected on mine, and I've obviously known them over the years, but they've really come home to me now. And some of them, for example, is that, since I've been a small child, I've been told I've got a weak body, a weak musculoskeletal system, can't build muscle, quite a floppy child. Like, there were always these things, and doctors throughout my life have labeled me with something, and these labels stick to us. They're almost like this patchwork. It's not beautiful, it's just patchy, and they get stuck to us. And the other factor which has impacted my life quite a lot is being told I've got learning difficulties, and being told, I think my mom's on the call, being told by my grade 2 teacher that I'm stupid, and having a principal in high school say that, Julie will be successful based on her personality, not on her intellect. And, you kind of wash them off a duck's back and you go, okay, Laka, let's move on. But the reality is that these things stick to us, and they sit with us, and they sit deeply in our beingness. And for us to live out our purpose is that when we deepen resilience and when we soften into it, we have a different perspective and ability to look at these belief systems with compassion, and not kind of, throw them to the wayside or chuck them, down somewhere, or get angry that we're feeling this way. But when we can actually just acknowledge their presence in our life, and to know where they came from, and to just look at them and look at how they are constructing, and why we, for example, like, I could never start my own business because I was told I was X, Y, and Z. I could never be strong enough to go out on my own and do because of these belief systems. And that's really struck me recently, because it comes in these fleeting moments, and instead of brushing them off harshly, I've learned to just let them come and to acknowledge them. And something just to, Mish, I know I'm a little bit over, but something just to sort of add, and maybe some people will resonate on the call, is that something last year when I was lying in bed and I used to just like stare out the window and think about all sorts of random stuff. And I thought, if someone from the outside had to look at my life and say, is Julie Robinson successful, and has she achieved anything worthwhile? The answer would probably be no. So, and I really sat with this, because I thought, I'm not working, I'm not married with like 2 kids and a dog, and I've had to I haven't bought a house, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this. And here I am, not working for 9 months, like trying to just get healthy. And I was like, what is the point? Like, who actually cares? And then there was this moment, and I remember my mom coming and lying on the bed with me the one day, and I said, Mom, like, really, I've been like processing all this stuff of how like unsuccessful I am. And what she just kind of listened to me. And then I said, but what is most impactful for me, and what's so powerful, is that I've never felt richer, wealthier, or freer in all my life. And here I am lying in bed with nothing, like zero, and I said, because of what I've learned and I've discovered about myself. And so what I've experienced, the depth that I've gone to, all that sort of stuff is really what has made my life rich. And that's the kind of that purpose element. And I know now when it's hard, like the last 6 weeks have been, there's, when I connect to that purpose, when I connect to that essence, when I connect to that, somehow I'm able to, for me, living meaningfully becomes then about, living authentically. And that's where that kind of that mind, heart, body intelligence through the breath has really helped me connect and center myself in that particular space. And so just to close off, I would like to, there's so much more to sort of talk about and to share, but, I think that probably covers it. But it's an interesting thing for me, which is that when we can find meaning in our struggle, whatever that may be for you, and we can, for me, it was looking at what I've been gifted and what I've been given, and we can ask ourselves those 3 questions, and it might be a different process for you, and we can get clear on our purpose. And when the tough times and the hard times come and they become really difficult and they stifle us, there's the breath that is softening. That's the deepening of resilience. That's the softening and the going down and the connection that we can find at that place. And the breath has really been powerful for me over the last 18 months. And so what I would like to do, just as I close off my particular part, is that I've got my journal here, as you can see. And so what I wrote this thing 2 weeks ago, Saturday, on the 27th. It was after a breathwork session I'd had. And before I went to bed that night, I just wrote these words, and I think they might sort of just bring everything together in terms of what I've said. So if you'll indulge me for a moment and listen to my voice for another minute, I will put this out there. So for all intents and purposes, let's just call it deepening resilience to live meaningfully. That's not what I thought at the time, but let's go with that. So, right. Slowing down, being still, listening, getting off the track to pause, to see, to reflect, to be. That is when we begin to hear, to listen to the whispers from within, to gently embrace them, to hold the essence of their message close to our hearts and listen for a comforting sense of home. When we are still, we soften. When we soften, we deepen. When we deepen, we can hear. When we hear, we resonate with an inner knowing, a felt sense of ease that reflects itself in the lifting of one corner of our lips to acknowledge its arrival. When we let go of the doing and the driving forward, the needing to achieve, perform, show, etc., we begin to live from a more authentic place. We discover the meaning of our lives through the lens of our center, our home, our place of beingness that can get left behind in the chaos of our daily living and habitual ways. It is there, it is waiting for us to stop, turn, and to look with curiosity. Together may we stand still in the warmth of the sun for just a moment, allowing our breath to awaken and guide us home with gentleness, kindness, and a depth of compassion that is honoring to the essence of our humanity. So thank you for listening to me for, hopefully it wasn't too long.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing. Okay, Michelle.
Thank you so much to both of you. I think it's what you've shared so honestly and openly. As one comment in the chat reads, it's just so powerful. It's about this honesty and opening up. It is really actually what the world needs, because we all experience these types of things when we grow up, but yet we kind of close the door and hide it from each other. And we need to know that as a community, we're actually not alone. We need to show up for each other and for ourselves, to open up those walls and break down the barriers. So I just want to thank you both for sharing so vulnerably and openly, because I think it sparked a lot for people. We're going to open up now to the discussion forum in the chat. If anybody has any comments or questions for Julie and Nicole, whilst those are coming in, I just want to kind of extract a couple of thoughts that did come through. Interestingly, how things align, because before Julie had even started speaking, people were commenting, and it kind of just flowed into exactly what Julie was saying. But Grant had this poignant thought about purpose is actually not a destination. You're constantly becoming. And how often our crutch can be that, thinking we have arrived in terms of what resilience is can lead to complacency, which then actually kind of handicaps us to deal with the unexpected. And that kind of leads into this discussion that happened around actually negative resilience. And how we forge through. And Julie, I think about you, sort of this armor, and we keep forging through, and how it supposedly serves us, but it's actually in the letting go and stripping of the armor and stopping the fight. And as one comment said, really just listen inside. That's where maybe joy and peace is released. And I think for both of you, the questions that you asked each other or asked yourselves are coming up as powerful triggers for people. That a lot of comments have said, thank you, I'm going to go away and really think about that. The work of Brené Brown is being mentioned a lot around vulnerability, and how this has been thought-provoking and life-changing for a lot of people. So
my view is my getting clear on my purpose in terms of why I believe I'm here enables me to direct my intention. So there is so much that comes into my world, and everything feels yes, and feels attractive, that I want to engage and I want to do. But if I'm me being clear that this is actually the game I want to play, this is a value I think I can provide, and instead of providing, say, all 20 things, it helps me focus and narrow down to where I believe I can add most value. So it enables me to be able to say yes and no to things. And also, when you talk about within that moment where I do want to unhinge, or maybe with a child who's not responding or doing their work or sitting down at the table for dinner, then I remind myself, well, what's my purpose? My purpose is to bring kindness, to ignite potential. So actually, how am I going to choose to show up right now in this moment? I can lose it and get angry, or I can role model. I can still express myself clearly, but if I come back to my purpose, it kind of guides my sense of remembering who I am, what I'm here to do, what I'm here for. And then it gets integrated into, I suppose, all my languaging. So like with my kids, I'll always say to them, they have an opportunity all the time. Whenever they meet someone, are they either going to leave them rising and inspired in some way, or leaving them depleted? And I think it kind of guides me all the time around my choice of beingness. It's kind of like a remembering, oh yeah, that's who I am, and that's a role that I feel I want to be. Does that help at all? Does that align to?
Nearly. I'm stuck, because purpose and resilience for me, if my intention is to leave the world better than I found it, then my purpose will be to X, Y, Z. And I'm like, hang on, my purpose is to leave the world better, and then I want to set intention to do. And I'm just, maybe it's not that important which word we use or what it means. It does help me that you said about coming back to center. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe they interweave together, and maybe they're the same. Maybe it is about setting an intention to fulfill that purpose, but then also going gently. My words, go gently. It's, we don't even know our level of impact, and it just could be momentary with one conversation. So it's kind of not getting heavy with it. I love what Julie gives, the gift, one of the many gifts that Julie gives me in my life, is this whole sense of bending and flowing, like the wind coming and pushes you one way, pushes you the other way. But the rootedness of purpose enables you to have whatever pushes you in whatever direction, because it gives you kind of like rootedness. And I thank Julie for those beautiful conversations that we've had around that. Julie, can you comment on that, or anybody else?
So maybe just, I think, Daniel, it's a great question, and I too have struggled, and I think it's coming back to that thing about, how language can be so empowering, but it can also create confusion. And sometimes it's going back to the felt experience of what that looks like in your daily life. And I think, someone for me who does intention very well is my mother, for example. She's so clear on her purpose, and she is so intentional in everything that she does. Even if it's the smallest thing, there is such a deep intention that sits behind that. And like Nicole was saying, we do speak about the tree. Like I find now that my anchor, because I've given something meaning, because I've given my life story meaning, because it's arisen within me, like God has given me these struggles and this stuff for a reason. And when I've gotten that, And I've really felt it. Like I said, I've dropped into my heart. I'm really clear on it. The intention now is that how I actually live my daily life and where I go and what I, as Nicole was saying, what you say yes to, what you say no to. But that's sometimes hard because we forget. But if we soften around that resilience element, if we look at the roots of the tree that are anchoring us, that are holding us in a place to say, hey, come back to this place. Don't forget about us. When all of this stuff happens and we are being flung around in 50,000 directions, we can come back and we can center ourselves in that moment. And I think for me, it's all kind of interrelated for sure, but I'm a lot more intentional now because my roots are more grounded. I'm clearer, and I'm clearer because I've given my life experience meaning. And hopefully throughout my days, I'll continue to live that out within a very intentional mindset and way of being.
Yeah, if I can add something there, Jules, and thank you for sharing that, because you have the tree analogy, and for me, I have a lighthouse analogy. So, the sort of sturdy solidness of the lighthouse with, your purpose. So if it is, for example, to leave the world a better place, that's the kind of, as the light shines out, that's the kind of holding pattern of the purpose. And the intention is all the rays and the moments and the experiences and the intentional actions that lead you to fulfill that purpose. So the intentions are kind of many activators in line with, in that scoop kind of thing, in the holding of what the purpose is, if that makes sense.
I can see now that people are making notes that they have to leave, and some people are texting me. So may I just make a request before people go? If there's a link on the chat, that I can share my screen, we would really, really appreciate your feedback, because we're not sure whether to go forward, how to go forward. We'd love to know what you would like. We've got a beautiful community here that's building. Different people can share and take the floor. What would you like this to look like?
To you, I think both Michelle and I are just so grateful to be part of this with you, and for your invitation to join you on this journey to honor your brother, and for everything that he did when he was here and continues to do. And we're just really grateful for the experience to be here in a really special moment in time. And to everyone on the call as well, who gives up their Friday afternoon to join us in these kind of conversations. It's just great. And we'd love to obviously hear more from you and your stories. And everyone's got a story, and I think that's what makes me so excited, that we all have a story. And we'd love to hear yours as well. So thank you to each of you for attending, and Mish, as always, just amazing ability to synthesize and pull things together, and just your presence. And Nicole, just immensely grateful to you for the opportunity. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you. Go gently, everybody, and have a beautiful, beautiful weekend.